You cannot have sustained, if you like, contentment of any sort if 60 or 70% of the entire population of an area like Gaza are dependent on something, or on aid for something as basic as food. And you've got to release people. I mean, what are young people going to think as they grow older if all they've known is a feeling of oppression? It can't do anybody any good. So we would like to see, of course, much more movement, much more private sector activity, fewer people dependent on aid, because I think that would be in the dual interests of Gazans, Palestinians more widely, and actually Israelis. I went up the Jordan Valley to Jiflik, and I have seen, for instance, farmers living very simply, trying to grow their vegetables, who cannot even construct a simple, tarpaulin-roofed wooden shelter to protect them from the sun in what is their country and it's their land, because the Israelis mark it as illegal. And yet right next door you've got water-fed rows and rows of vegetables with new buildings and pylons delivering electricity to settlers who are living outside their own country in somebody else's. This is not acceptable. It is illegal internationally and it is immoral.
I'm Carl Arundel and you're watching In Focus. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by the Right Honourable Alan Duncan MP. He's the Minister of State for International Development at a time when the whole of North Africa and the Middle East is in upheaval and the world holds its breath even, awaiting the finalisation of the historic accord between Fatah and Hamas. Britain has just pledged to provide over £349 million, that's $550 million, to supporting Palestine over the next 4 years. I'm delighted again, as I said, to be joined by the Right Honourable Alan Duncan, Minister for International Development, responsible for implementing this important commitment. Salam alaikum, welcome to Islam Channel.
Thank you.
Now, £349 million during a time of austerity, that's a lot of money, isn't it?
Well, Britain's very proud of the fact that even though a lot of budgets are being cut all over the world, we're remaining consistent with our commitment to some of the poorest and most needy people in the world. And Palestine falls in this category for two reasons. One, the obvious problems in Gaza, where so many people are dependent on aid because they can hardly move around or get a job. But in the Palestinian Authority, part of our objective is to help equip them to be a competent government so that if, as we hope one day, there is a Palestinian state, they can get straight in there and prove to the world that they can govern the country well.
Now, the implications of a final reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah and the formation, as they say, of a unity government has led to threats of the US, for example, withdrawing up to $400 million. It makes it therefore especially poignant that Britain has decided at this time to commit to a spend of over £350 million over the next 4 years. Is this an indication that you regard the reconciliation as a positive development, and how important do you see your own ongoing commitment to Palestine?
It certainly reflects our ongoing commitment to Palestine and to the Palestinian Authority particularly. And I was there last week to sign in Ramallah with Prime Minister Fayyad this memorandum of understanding, which absolutely illustrates our commitment to the Palestinian Authority and the occupied territories, not just to help them with preparing for government, but also to help them with crucial areas such as healthcare. I mean, actually, if you look at inoculation and vaccination, the West Bank has got very good numbers, and I went to a health clinic which covers the sort of primary health objectives of the area. But this would be in jeopardy if the finances of the Palestinian Authority were to collapse. And at the moment, they're facing a big squeeze on the money, because whereas we're giving money, to get results. A lot of traditional donors are not. So one of the things I said very openly when I was in Ramallah was, please, can other countries also show the commitment that we in the United Kingdom are showing?
Well, that's very bold, and it's also known, but the key component of my question was that you're really sort of flying against a general trend of many of the other major donor countries who are slightly flexing over what they see as a huge shift, the coming together of the two factions in Palestine. For some, suggests that they cannot rely upon the commitment to a non-violent process and so on afterwards. Are you similarly concerned about that, or are you confident that that's not going to be a problem?
There's a paradox here. We are concerned and hopeful in equal measure. The paradox is that we are not going to get easily a Palestinian state if Palestine itself is divided between the West Bank and Gaza, and similarly in parallel between Fatah and Hamas. The other side of that equation is that Hamas need to renounce violence, and we cannot deal with them directly, and we have to behave under our own law about not in any way financially benefiting Hamas. So the path towards reconciliation is complicated, but it does require the renunciation of violence. We can't deal with people who want and intend to fire rockets or in any way indulge in violent acts. But we do want a united Palestine, which is competent and allowed to become a state. So we'd like to see the peace process get going again. But in the meantime, we are dealing very, very strongly with Prime Minister Fayyad and with Mahmoud Abbas and with the governing team in Ramallah, and our commitment is very solid.
Now, you said recently, and I quote, "Our long-term goal is a sovereign and viable Palestinian state, living alongside a secure and universally recognised Israel based on the borders of 1967, with Jerusalem the future capital of both states, and a fair settlement for refugees," you said. Just a couple of months ago, following US President Obama's Middle East speech, as it's been referred to, in which he talked of a future sovereign state along 1967 borders, this was ridiculed by the Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu, a rebuttal which ironically received standing ovations in the US Senate, of all places. Are you committed to pursuing the establishment of those conditions as a prerequisite for the establishment of the sovereign state of Palestine? And will that be also a prerequisite for future good relations with Israel?
The existing state of international law has to be the starting point, and that is UN resolutions and 67 borders. But we all accept, the world has changed, and that is why there will be some negotiations. But the basic ingredients of a settlement are borders, settlements, right of return, and Jerusalem. Now, we all accept that maybe some of the 67 borders have spread a bit, but not to the point where we can recognize illegal settlements as legitimate Israeli territory without proper negotiation. At the moment, they are illegal, and they are growing, and they are effectively taking land from a country which is not theirs, and they are encircling Jerusalem. In addition, the Israelis are making planning decisions in East Jerusalem, and it's not their country. So these negotiations have to start with 1967, and that is the beginning. But if there are swaps and agreements about slightly changed borders, then that will be the basis of an agreement. But, if it's all about security, then why do you need settlements and the wall? I mean, the wall could legitimately be along the 67 border, but at the moment it is protecting illegal settlements as well, and that is an unacceptable state of affairs.
Now, you just mentioned again about a fair settlement for refugees. Does this mean that Britain does support the right of return for the millions of beleaguered Palestinians in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, across the diaspora?
Look, we accept that this is one of the main demands of the Palestinians, in the same way as the Israelis will equally demand that Israel should be recognized as a Jewish state. Now, it's not for me to say what the Palestinian negotiating position has to be, but we accept, as I was saying a moment ago, that these are the ingredients that need to be examined and discussed and agreed on in any kind of settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Now, I know you've been yourself to the region on many occasions over the last 10, 15 years, and even you would have not failed to have been shocked by some of the statistics published in the recent UNRWA, United Nations Works Relief Agency report, which show the conditions to be in a genuine serious state crisis throughout Gaza, but also the West Bank. To a large degree, they say, in Gaza at least, this has been based on the continued siege, this time last year.